Okay, guys, so let's start over chapter number 2, operating system course. And this chapter is about Windows operating system. So we have two main things to discuss in this chapter. Firstly, we'll discuss the Windows overview. We'll take an overview of Windows. And mainly we will discuss the history of Windows, different versions of Microsoft Windows that they have released so far. Then we will discuss the file systems. I'll just give you overview or the definitions of file systems, different file systems that we use in Microsoft Windows. And then we will also discuss the registries. What's the role of registry? And for example, if you make any settings in your Microsoft Windows, where that particular setting stores and stuff like that, we'll talk about it. And that's of course the registry. The second agenda item is we'll talk about some Windows administration techniques, some techniques for Windows administration, and we will discuss some few commands of Microsoft Windows. In fact, scripting and all that. Of course, we will not do any kind of scripting in this chapter, but we'll discuss few commands that we use in Microsoft Windows, and in our lab we will actually practically work on those particular commands as well. So let's start with the first agenda item, and starting with the historical background of Microsoft Windows. So in Microsoft Windows, if you remember, the first Microsoft Windows or the first edition of Microsoft was the Windows was DOS. It was DOS based, and DOS stands for Disk Operating System. Disk Operating System. So first version of Microsoft Windows was basically Disk Operating System, DOS based. And from DOS based operating system, it gave the concept of data management. So the concept of data management, it was emerged after the DOS based operating system they actually came in. These DOS based operating system, they are mainly based on command line interface. If you remember, you just have to open, if you want to access anything in your hard drive, so you need to type a command. If you want to in fact open a file, you need to write a command. So these DOS based operating systems were basically use command line interface, CLI, command line interface. And these command line interface can be used to, for example, if you want to run a program, if you want to execute instruction, run a program, anything, whatever you want to do on your operating system, it has to be in some commands. You need to write down commands in order to execute something. Then after some time, or you can say afterwards, in the new version of Microsoft Windows, GUI, the graphical user interface, it actually took place it took the place of the DOS based operating system, or you can say command line interface. It got replaced with GUI because it's more convenient, and the main goal of operating system is convenience. So GUI is more convenient as compared to DOS, or you can say command line interface, in fact. So since 1993, Microsoft has released almost 20 versions of Windows, in fact. So 20 versions of Windows have been released so far since 1993, when they released their first operating system, which is basically the GUI based. But they actually got more success after Windows 95 and Windows XP and all that. And the first edition, as you know, the computers or the systems are basically, the word size is, it could be 32-bit or it could be 64-bit. So there are two types of word sizes of our computers. It could be 32-bit, 64-bit. Nowadays, most of our personal computers are basically 64-bit. But if you go like in 2010, 2015 and all, we mainly used 32-bit. Still, we do have 32-bit system as the 32-bit processor we still have nowadays as well. Uh, if we talk about the first operating system which was available with 64-bit, it was Windows XP. So Windows XP, which was released in 2000, it was basically the first operating system that was available with 64-bit edition. Like 64-bit processors, for 64-bit processor we can use Windows XP in fact. And if you talk about other operating system like Windows Vista, Windows 7 and all other systems, they actually come with 64-bit and 32, including the XP as well. XP, it has two variants, 32-bit or 64-bit. For 32 bits version of Windows, at least we need 4 GB of RAM. So for smooth functionalities, for 32-bit version of Windows, we need 4 GB of RAM, and same is the case for 64 bits word length. We need 8 GB of RAM for 64-bit. GUI, we already talked about GUI, graphical user interface. What exactly GUI provides? So by the introduction or addition of the GUI, we can now visualize over hard drive. So hard drive can be visualized. So people can see their data, where the files are located. So you can directly access the file. You don't have to write down commands, nothing like that. So you can visualize hard drive. So GUI provides hard drive visualization. So one can visualize a hard drive, like we can see the data, files, everything can be visualized. In the GUI, there are mainly two things that you guys actually, we experience by using the GUI based operating system. One is basically desktop. And what is basically a desktop? Desktop is basically a hard, you can say it's the over home screen. And then we have the task pane, where all the applications, you can say your applications and whatever other stuff is, it's basically located in whatever you have installed in your operating system. That is, it can be accessed to the task pane. Okay, next is the operating system vulnerabilities and how we can avoid those vulnerabilities, how we can improve our operating system security, in fact. So as we discussed in our chapter number 1, hackers, in order to take control of a computer, firstly they find the vulnerabilities of operating system, the vulnerabilities of operating system that is running on remote computer, on the target computer. And we have discussed the operating system, the Microsoft Windows vulnerabilities and Linux vulnerabilities in detail in chapter number 9 in our coming chapter. So how we can improve Windows security? There are plenty of ways to do that. Few basic techniques are, firstly, of course, you need to implement a virus and malware protection software or a system. And the one that comes with your Microsoft Windows by default, it's called Windows Defender. But you don't have to rely only on Windows Defender. Beside Windows Defender, you should also use some third-party secure the malware protection software as well, like Avast, for example, the Kaspersky, Norton, etc. There are many. So just pick a third-party malware protection or antivirus system as well. Other than that, you need to disable your services which are not in use. How we can do that? You can actually block those TCP IP ports in your firewall. So block those particular ports, and automatically what will happen, you will not get any traffic through those particular ports which are not in use, or which you don't know. And the problem is that whenever you actually, for example, if you don't configure or customize your Microsoft Windows according to your own, or if you don't have a good malware protection or virus protection software enabled beside the Windows Defender, what can happen? By default, many of the ports are open in your computer. Many of the TCP IP ports are by default open. So you have to actually be very careful about it. Okay. Then, for example, if you feel like you got the virus in your computer, so immediately restart your computer in safe mode and run the antivirus. Next is the file system. File system or file is basically it's the file system is basically how information is stored on your storage media. So definition of file system is it's the how information is stored on storage media. So one thing here is very important. I believe everybody's well familiar with the different types of files like doc file, .exe, etc., etc. So basically, the hard drives, or you can say the storage devices, in fact, they support different kind of filing system. For example, your USB drive, it supports a filing system called FAT. It stands for file allocation table. Then, for example, if we talk about Linux, it support a filing system XFS, extensible filing system. Microsoft Windows, NTFS, new technology filing system. These are basically some different filing system. So these particular filing systems, they support different files like .exe file, .doc file, for example, .dmg file, etc., etc. Okay, so depending upon the filing system, they support different file. Now, for example, now please understand that thing. If you want to store anything, let's say this is your hard drive, okay, and if you want to store anything on your hard drive, so that particular thing should be a file, and file means it should have. For example, for example, you're trying to install something .exe file. This is a file. Okay, you wanna, and that's, as you know, it's executable file. So you want to actually run this executable file on Linux. Can you do that? No. And for example, you want to actually run .exe file on your Mac. Can you do that? Of course not, because the filing system installed that comes with Linux and Mac, it doesn't recognize .exe file. So .exe file is basically recognizable with NTFS, which comes with Microsoft Windows. Like, getting my point? So file system is how information is stored on file system. And if you want to store anything on storage media, it should be in a file. It should have a file description. There is a very important thing with the filing system. It is called MBR. Very important thing. MBR stands for Master Boot Record. And what is Master Boot Record? It's basically, it contains information on how the hard drive partition is organized. And that MBR information is very, very important. Why it is important? Because it defines where your operating system is located. So for example, when you boot your computer, restart your computer, MBR informs where the operating system is. And after locating the operating system, then you can get into the Windows and all. We use the term boot. Boot means restarting. When we restart the computer, it's called booting process. And there are two firmware which support the booting process. There are two firmware that comes with computer. One is called BIOS, basic input output system. And second type of firmware is, which is a new type, it is called UEFI. UEFI is basically used with the Mac and Linux, but Windows, they still use BIOS. And of course, it is UEF will replace BIOS as well. You will see in BIOS what happens. For example, if you boot your computer in the booting process, what happens? It is a 4-step model. First thing that happens is basically it initialize your BIOS. So when you restart your computer BIOS are initialized. It means it is fully, it is ready to take input from user. Like for example, you can give input from your keyboard, from your mouse and all. And after it initializes the BIOS, the next step is it run post. Post is called power on self test. So power on self test, where it tests all its components and everything. And after post, next is basically it load operating system in RAM. And again, how they locate operating system through MBR. That's MBR that we discussed, because it contains the information about hardware partition. And the last is user can perform authentication and access the authentication, and the user setting will be loaded. So this is basically what's going on when you boot your computer, restart your computer. Very, very important thing. Whenever you boot your computer, those services or applications which needs to be you can say which needs to be which should actually start automatically, or which should run each time whenever you boot your computer, those should be set up as automatic. So what does it mean? For example, your antiviruses and all that stuff, those are basically by default set to automatic. Means they will start up automatically whenever you boot your computer. So very important thing is automatic setup or startup, in fact, must be selected for the services that should run when you boot computer. So you don't have to, because most of the time we don't remember that that particular program should run accordingly. Next, few definitions. One is the process. Process is basically instance of a program, or you can say a program that is currently in use. So a program or a software, it can have many processes. So whenever you're running a program, you are basically in one of the instance of a program. Like all the processes, all the attributes are not running. So for example, let's say you're working on Microsoft Word. Are you utilizing all the features of Microsoft Word? No. So for example, you're typing a document. So you're basically in a different process is running. When you are trying to save it, so you are entering a different process. So process is basically an instance of a program that is currently running. Okay, so a program can have many processes. In fact, thread. What is a thread? Thread is basically it's the part of a process. Now, just like, for example, this is the program or software. Software can have, let's say, 3 processes. A process can have, let's say, 3 threads. So that's basically a thread. So I mean, within the process, you might be in that particular thread maybe. Now let's come to the last agenda item for today, and that's the for part 1. Sorry, it's the registry. Registry is basically is a Windows database that stores information about user settings. In fact, settings, for example, applications, hardware and software. I mean, everything which is associated with user, hardware, whatever is a part of computer, it is basically stored in registry. And when a user makes changes in system settings, it stores, like, those settings are basically stores in registry. So please remember, hackers or the viruses, they try to get into your registry, and then they take control of your Windows setting, access computer remotely, etc., etc. Section 2, Windows administration. I believe everybody has heard about, for example, some programs or some applications, they require admin rights to run or to execute. Admin right mean where you can customize the setting, where you have all possible settings of your computer, where you can create new accounts, new users, you can define policies for different users, etc., etc. That is basically Windows admin, in fact. And it's not recommended to log in as an administrator in Microsoft Windows, because if you got hacked when you were admin, some other person, they can also actually take control of your computer, and they have the same privilege our admin might have. So it's always better to create an account and then you can actually use the computer, unless you want to do some settings, you want to create policies and procedures and all that. uh, so in window administration, there are plenty of ways to actually do some automatic tasks. To For system administration, we use plenty of tools. One of the tool that is called command line interface. CLI is used to run programs. For example, if you want to run programs, we use CLI. We can use CLI beside GUI as well, and you can navigate file system and file management as well. For example, if you want to manage files, delete file, create new files, we can do that by using CLI, command line interface. Next, PowerShell scripts are used to create scripts to automate tasks for system administration. And the extension of PowerShell scripts are basically .ps1. So that is basically PowerShell script. And PowerShell scripts are not basically, you can run PowerShell script with Microsoft Windows, with Linux and all that, okay? And we can create scripts like, for example, viruses, antiviruses, firewalls, everything can be designed. Just like batch scripting, bash, Visual Basic script, PowerShell scripts are much more powerful than other script. There are many different commands, and you guys will see most of those commands in our lab as well. But let me just introduce you a few commands. One of the command that we use, for to establish a connection between the shared directory, that is called netuse. And netuse command is also used for enumeration attacks. And in our chapter 9, you will see we'll use netuse command, and I'll show you guys how Windows XP or Windows 7 can be hacked if we use netuse command. I'll show you guys. But Windows 10 and Windows 8, they're not prone to netuse command. So in netuse command, what this particular command is for, netuse command is used to establish a connection to a shared directory on a remote server. So if you want to make a direct connection, for example, they use netuse command, find the computer whose net BIOS, these particular ports are open, like 137, 139, 143, these ports are open, and then they use netuse and then establish a connection with their hard drive, okay? Netstat, we use this command to see active TCP IP connections. Then we have NSLOOKUP, network server lookup command. It is basically used to manually query the DNS server to resolve a specific host name. So if you open your command prompt, if you just type NSLOOKUP, hit enter, so you will be entered in NSLOOKUP. So then what you can do is, if you type www. for example, gwinnettech.edu, enter, you will see the IP address of Gwinnett Tech. So if you want to find the IP address of domain name, just open command prompt, type NSLOOKUP, and then start typing the website, and you will see their IP address. Then we have the ping command. Ping is basically just to verify the connection. And we use this verify the connection with the host or the server. So we use this particular ping command for troubleshooting. Now, let me just give you a scenario. For example, let's say, this is your computer, and you are basically in the local area network, and this is, let's say, your access point, also known as gateway. For example, this is your gateway, and let's say this is the another host which is outside your local area network. So for example, if you send a ping command to your access point or the gateway, and ping command to this outside host, like outside local area network host. So you have, okay, I repeat. Let's say you sent one ping command to your gateway and second ping command to outside local area network host. You didn't get any response from your, for example, I mean, after sending a ping command, if you didn't get any response from your access point or gateway router, but if you got a response from the local, outside local area, outside host, in fact, so what does it mean? It means you have a healthy connection because, I mean, your ping command is going out of your local area network. So it means you are connected with the internet. But why you're not getting response from gateway? The reason is that security configurations, like there might be some security rules configured on your access point or router, security rules that might be configured on the router, which prevents your router from processing or executing the ping command. And why we do so? Reason is that to avoid the DOS attack, because there are many tools you will see in our coming chapters. Like hackers, they use those tools to launch or to send flood of pings. So in order to avoid ping commands, we usually disable respond to the ping command. We don't, I mean, most of the gateway servers, they don't respond to the ping packets, even though they are up, they are active. CD, it stands for change directory. There are plenty of ways to do that. For example, if you are in desktop, so and you want to access any specific folder on desktop, so you can type cd and the name of folder. You can directly access that particular folder, or you can get into that folder. If you type cd two dots, it means you are basically going to previous directory. Like if you are in desktop, desktop, you can actually go out in the C drive as well. If you type cd /, so it means you are trying to access to, you are trying to get into root directory. Okay, we will use these particular commands in our lab, and just to see how these commands actually work. If anybody has any other questions, just send me email. We can always have a discussion on it. Thank you so much.